Mic check 1 2 1 2. Now today I want to talk about when is the right time to actually pull the trigger and hire a VA or bring a number two into your business. Now there's a lot of content out there, some that I even create, focus on why to hire a VA, how to find a VA, who to actually hire, where to find them, right, and what to actually have them do. But there's not a ton of content out there focused on when is the right time to bring them on. Now, I've been hiring VAs for the last 15 years. In addition to a cleaning business, I also own a marketing agency. I'm an author. I own a book publishing company, have about 9 books published, working on our 10th. Own a consulting company, and a few other things. And with all those businesses, I have hired VAs and overseas team members to help run majority of the operations of those businesses. And when I break it down, it really comes to 2 things that I look at that helps me determine when it is to bring on a VA and when not to. And those 2 things break down to revenue and profit. Let's break it down. So first, let's talk about revenue. Now, it depends on the kind of business you have, right? There's a certain amount of money that is going to cost to bring a VA team member over. Now, the role that that business plays in your life is going to matter when you make that decision. So, for example, when I started my cleaning business, I immediately knew I wanted to hire a VA, so I hired one from the first month. And the reason is because I did not depend on the revenue from that business to actually help me, fulfill my needs and pay my bills and that kind of thing. But if you're someone who this is your full time and you need it to do so, then this revenue equation we're going to look at is going to help you a little bit. So let's break it down. So let's say you have a cleaning business or a home service business that is making $5,000, right, per month. So with that $5,000, depends on where you're looking. Generally, if you're going to bring an overseas team member, you're probably going to be spending something around between $800 to $1,500 for a good one. So we'll just go with $1,250 as a median number. This is if you bring somebody full time, etc. If you're looking at the States, it's going to be a little bit more. But let's just put that number to the side for a second, right? Now, in the nature of our business, depends on the model you have, whether you have full-time employees or contractors. Generally, your gross profit, which is how much money you take home after you pay your team members, will be somewhere, if it's healthy, somewhere in the 40, 50 range, right? And some even lower. I know for me, my gross profit is 35. I like to pay our cleaners as much as we can, right? And so in that case, if we look at $5,000 with a gross profit of 40 to be conservative, we're looking at $2,000, right? So 5,000 minus $3,000 to cleaners or $3,000 to your peoples. Now we're looking at just about $2,000 left over, right? 2,000 right here. Boom. So now this is your gross profit that you have to work with. But then within this gross profit, you have a few other things, right? For example, let me just make this easier to look at. So we got 2,000 left, but then we also have a few other things, right? We have software, tools, and things like that. We also have advertising. Let's just say hypothetically, just for now, at a $5,000 rate, you're spending $500 in advertising. So we're gonna remove 500. We'll call this ads, right? So we got 5,000 top line, paid 3,000 to cleaners. You have 2,000 left. This is your gross profit. Then you have 500. Now you're gonna have 1,500 left, right? So I'll bring this down, call it 1,500. This is what we have left. And then we're gonna bring the equal down here. So then the next thing you have is probably tools, right? Think of your Zap, your BookingKoala, your QuickBooks, your whatever. So let's just say we're gonna put a number at maybe 250 for those tools. It depends on the size and the space, whatever, right? So we're just gonna look at this for now. So for now, just based on these numbers right here, we have 5,000 to start, 3,000 to cleaners, 2,000 left over. Out of the 2,000, 500 for ads. You have 1,500 left over. Out of that, 250 for tools. So now you have 1,250 left, right? Oh, I just did that. So this is how much you have left as a profit that you have remaining in this business, right? And if I do 1,250 divided by 5,000, it'll tell us in this case your net profit is 25% of the business. So we'll just do 25% net, right? Now, $1,250 depends on where you live in the world, may be a lot of money, but depends on if you live other places, it may not be enough, right? And so if you're of the case where you actually depend on a business for you to be able to make a living and this is how you pay your bills, chances are if you're making $5,000, you probably cannot afford to bring in a VA or a team member based on this, right? Because generally at this rate, if let's say you know you need a certain amount of money, let's just say hypothetically you need $5,000 for yourself. So I'm gonna go with 5,000. So we'll just, this is the number for the team member. So right, I'm gonna bring 5,000 here, just so we can remember these numbers. So 5,000 is the number that you need to make to be able to, feel like this business is taking care of your bills and etc. Right now, in that case, if your goal is 5,000, how much money you're gonna need to make is significantly higher for you to be able to actually bring on or afford to bring on a team member, right? Because if we're saying 25% is the net you're making just of these basic simple numbers, then if I say $5,000 divided by 0.25 is gonna tell me that $20,000 is how much you would need to make, so that 25% net becomes what your take home ends up being. And we're not even looking at taxes and stuff like that, so you can ignore those. But then in that case, you may say, well, if I'm making 5,000, then my team member will cost $1,250. Then based on this math here, right? Based on this, I'm just gonna put a plus right here. You're gonna need $6,250 to be able to afford yourself and a team member. So we're gonna go the same thing. We're gonna do 6,250 divided by these, which means you're gonna need to make $25,000 a month to be able to actually afford a VA, right? If you want this to be a full-time and you have a VA doing a lot of the work. So this is one way you can look at the numbers. Now, for most of us, maybe this is not our full-time, right? Or maybe we want to know, well, can I do this part-time and still get a team member? So that's when you have to decide, well, how much money do I want to actually make? In my case, because I didn't necessarily care to make a penny from this business in the beginning, as soon as I was able to have 12, this number here net, I brought on a team member because I wanted them to take care of the business and grow. And then from there, every penny that we made after that became profit of mine. But I knew from the very beginning, I wanted to build a business that it could run without me. So the first route is based on revenue. So what you need to do is look at how much money you want to make from the business, right? How much you want to make from the business, plus how much it's going to cost you to pay that team member. And then looking at your numbers, looking at what is your net profit. And if you do the division I just did, it'll tell you how much revenue you need to make high level to be able to determine when it's time for you to bring on another team member. Now, if you say, look, Jacques, I'm gonna do this part-time, I don't need to do this thing and make this money up front, then in that case, you can say, look, as long as I make $1,000, I'm good. Then you do the same math, right? We're gonna go reverse engineer and say, well, if this is 1,000, now I just need to make 2,250. Divide that by 0.25. It'll tell us as long as the business gets to $9,000, you can walk away with at least $1,000 profit in your pocket, while also being able to pay for a full-time team member, and the list goes on. There are a few other things you can change here. For example, you can spend less on ads or more on ads. You can figure out how to save money on tools, little things like that. But just overall, this is the first approach to figuring out when is the right time, which is when you can actually afford it. Now, the second route is, let's say you're a whole different business. We're going to change these numbers up a little bit. I'm going to change, we're going to go to a business that's making, say, 50K. We're going to keep the same number. So let's say 20K, 30K. We're going to go here. Let's say they're only spending 3,000 on ads. And then, so that's going to be 20 minus 3,000 is going to be 17 here. Then tools. The good thing about tools is that it increases, but not proportionally. So generally, you probably going to only spend no more than, say, 500 at this level. So you're going to save some money here, right? And so if we do this math now, we have 17. Then we're left with, if I'm not mistaken, 16,500. Something like that, right? Now I'm going to do 16,500 divided by 50,000, which means your net now increased to 33%, right? So let's say you're running this business by yourself, because ideally you start and you start the business yourself, and then you say you have cleaners that you brought on. That I'm doing this math assuming you've already brought on cleaners, and now you're looking at, do I bring on a team member to help me run the business, right? Admin. At this rate now, let's say you're at 33%. This is a great milestone, right? 33%. If we're looking at $50,000 in revenue, and let's just say on average, most clean jobs are about $250, it means at this rate, you're probably dealing with 200 jobs a month, right? Which is, if I do 200, a lot of numbers, divided by 25 days, if you're, say you don't work on the weekends or something like that, that's about 8 jobs a day. That means you're busy as H. I don't know if I can curse on. Anyways, right? So with that said, this seems good on paper, but there's a rule of thumb, which is the second way that I determine whether it's time for you to bring somebody else, which is based on your KPIs. Now, generally, I'm going to bring this down a little bit. With your KPIs, there are a couple of things I like to look at as considered healthy. So I'll go 35 to 45% for gross profit. I think that's healthy. If you're too high, it means you may not be paying your people enough. If you're too low, it means you may be paying your people too much. I look at 15 through 25% net profit as healthy. If you're too low, you got to cut some things. If you're too high, it means you're not investing as much on growth. That means you're not spending as much on ads, or you're not bringing on team members. And so in this example above here, and there are some other things I look at too, like your CAC and your LTV and what it tells you, but we're not going to focus on that right now. So going to the second route now, it's based on your KPIs. And so let's say this is your business, but you're running it solo. The fact that you're at 33% here, based on a healthy number, it means you have 8% net that you can afford to spend on other things. So let's say I go $50,000 times 0.08. Yeah, that's the math, right? Yep, 0.08, that's $4,000. That means at this stage, you can afford to bring on almost 3 more VAs or 3 more team members on your team while still being profitable and still being healthy, right? Because I'm saying 15, even if you wanted to say, look, I'll go down to 20% net profit, then that means you have 13% to invest. So for example, let's say this is your situation, then looking at this, I'm going to go $50,000 times 0.13, we're at $6,500. Now that $6,500 means you can allocate let's say 2 of it for team members, and then the rest on ads for growth or other endeavors that help you build the business. And the beautiful thing is, because of the kind of business we run, with 1 or 2 other team members, you can scale this thing where it could run without you at this level. And so then at this same $50,000 level, right, you're not walking away with $16,000 per month. That's 33%. Let's just say for you, you're only going to walk away with, let's say once all said and done, you're only going to walk away with 18% or even 16%, right? Or, right, that's $8,000. So it's either you make, say, $16,000 and you work all day and night, or you make $8,000 to $9,000, but you don't work, just a few hours a day, right? Like a lot of folks I know have been able to achieve that, where they're only checking in here and there. And like for me, most of my team, 95% of my companies ran without me. If there's like a situation, a client escalation or something like that needs me, but that's basically it, right? And so to recap, those are the 2 things that I use to determine when it's time for me to bring somebody else, which is 1, based on my revenue goals and what profit I need from the business, I just reverse engineer, and it tells me once I reach this number here, then I could bring somebody else on board. And 2, based on my KPIs. If my net is too high, it just means I'm not investing enough in people or in ads or in whatever. And so the more net profit you have, the more I encourage you. So it's one of those things where in theory, it looks good to have a high net. It means you're really profitable. But then again, investors look at that as you just not investing enough. Same thing applies to CAC or customer acquisition costs, right? Generally, and this is not what we're talking about today, but generally, if you're looking at CAC, in our industry, you're going to see something like 75 to 125. I consider all of these healthy CACs in this business model, especially because the LTV has a chance of getting up there if you have a recurrence, whatever. But there may be somebody out there whose CAC is $20 or $10 or $0, right? On paper, that looks good, but it just means you're not advertising enough. And so that's what some of these things mention to you. And I've made a previous video that breaks down what each of these numbers mean. So, but hopefully this helps in thinking about when is the right time to hire a team member. But remember, before you make that hiring decision, really important thing is that before you hire, right, you have to first systematize as much as you can, eliminate whatever is not needed, automate as much as possible with tools like BookingKoala and other tools out there. And then finally, do you then delegate the rest to whatever team members you're going to be hiring. All right. Hope this helps. Drop a question in the comments if you have a question. All right. Peace.